Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League predictions. It's of course match week 7. Now Liverpool lead the way at the moment despite losing at Crystal Palace last weekend. They have 5 wins from the opening 6 Premier League games. They have 15 points. Arsenal, Palace and Spurs are sitting in the top 4 at the moment. Crystal Palace are now the only side in the Premier League unbeaten. 3 wins, 3 draws. Manchester City have scored the most goals in the opening 6 games of this Premier League campaign so far, which is 14. And Arsenal and Crystal Palace have the best defensive record so far, conceding only 3. And Burnley, West Ham and Wolves are in the bottom 3. Now, we're currently live on YouTube, X and Facebook, so get your score predictions in. I'm joined again by Gareth McGuiness, channel regular. Gareth, how are you?
All good, Chris. These weeks are absolutely flying on. I can't believe we're on the week 7 already. Would you believe it? And of course, just around the corner, there is a dreaded international break. Just when we got our Champions League football back, progressed into the next round of the League Cup, there's an international break to come through. And as you well know, Chris, being an Ireland fan during an international break is tougher than being a fan during a league season.
Let me just say before we get into the Premier League predictions, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook at the moment, or indeed on X, there is a QR code top left. If you'd like to vote for us at the Football Content Awards, we are up for 4 awards, so please do vote for us. Your support will be really, really appreciated. Now, Premier League match week 7. 1 game will take place on Friday evening. Bournemouth will take on Fulham. 4 games will take place on Saturday. Leeds v Spurs, the early kick-off. And then we've got Arsenal, West Ham. Manchester United will face Sunderland. And Chelsea will host Liverpool. And then 5 games on Sunday. Aston Villa against Burnley. Everton against Crystal Palace. Newcastle will take on Ange Postecoglou's Nottingham Forest. Wolves will take on Brighton. And Brentford will take on Manchester City. Gareth, before we get into the score predictions for match week 7, what did you make of match week 6? Of course, we spoke a little bit about Graham Potter. Would he last? Would he get that game? He didn't get that game in the end, away at Everton. Of course, Nuno Espirito Santo came in. Ange Postecoglou was on the end of a poor result yet again. What did you make of match week 6?
Somebody actually messaged me, Chris, and says, you and Chris do know that Graham Potter's been sacked. They were obviously watching it the next morning. So I just completely threw our whole prediction about West Ham. Anyone watching the game must have been thinking that, but if we did actually do it the night before. So very strange, Chris, isn't it, that a manager is sacked like on the morning of the Premier League weekend starting? Because the 12:30 game was Brentford and Man United, and it just broke about an hour before kickoff, an hour and a half before kickoff, that Graham Potter was going to be removed from his post. And we're seeing this new kind of way, Chris, now where managers are being sacked as basically as soon as an hour manager is signing his contract. You know, where teams are reluctant now to go to a caretaker for a few games, or because they know how valuable the Premier League is, and they know how valuable it is to pick up points. So the reason obviously Graham Potter wasn't sacked in the days before was they were still trying to agree Nuno's deal, and as soon as that was done, then Graham Potter, because Graham Potter, funny enough, took the press conference the day before and was asked questions about the game on Monday night. Now, personally, I think it's quite disrespectful that that's happened to Graham Potter, but it just shows you how cutthroat football is, Chris. And, this is a ruthless business, and if you're not getting results, you're always going to be in jeopardy of the sack. And, we're going to speak about it like we spoke about it every week. Ruben Amram's got a huge game coming up this week. Well, could we be saying a similar thing about him in the weeks to come? But match week 6, it all started off with that blockbuster. We says it was going to be a massive game for Brentford Man United. We both says we fancied goals in the game. Funny enough, going against the grain of a 12:30 kickoff, and there was 4 goals in the game, a penalty, and I don't think it was a great weekend for VAR, Chris. And it started in that game. There was a number of very controversial decisions that VAR got involved in. And there was a lot of debate on Ref Watch on Monday with Dermot Gallagher about some of the decisions. So, that was a big talking point of the weekend. Then you move on to Liverpool getting beat at 3 o'clock. We topped that up as we couldn't believe it. It was a 3 o'clock kickoff and it wasn't being broadcast in the UK. What a game that was, luckily enough. One of the advantages of being Irish is there's a 3 o'clock game live every Saturday on Premier Sport. And I watched that game and it was a fantastic, breathless game. And there hasn't been too many games like that all season. I was geared up for the Ange, first home one. It didn't happen. And then, of course, Spurs, clock, and you just think it's been such a funny day. Chelsea losing, Liverpool losing, Man United losing. Maybe isn't as funny anymore in terms of results, but after beating Chelsea, you kind of expected them to, go into that game points and full confidence. Didn't happen. And it all points towards maybe Wolves were going to be the team that was going to get off the bottom of the table. And up until the 93rd minute, it looked like they were going to get that first one. And another thing as well, Chris, it was just such a weekend of late goals. I think there was 8 goals scored in stoppage time after the 90 minutes. So it was a weekend of late goals. Then you move on to Sunday, and the blockbuster game was always, of course, Villa get their first one against Fulham, but the blockbuster was always going to be Newcastle Arsenal. We know there's needle in this game, and I thought it was another brilliant game, to be honest. I think really good weekend of football, because we've been speaking about it, Chris, that the games haven't been as maybe good as we expected them to be. But I thought last weekend was a really good weekend of Premier League football. And of course, it just shows you, Chris, and I think we've said it this year, all 20 teams are very competitive. Even before that game kicked off against Wolves, I was saying to Liverpool fans who, in these group chats that, Wolves aren't like the Southampton of last year. They're going to pick up points in this league. They've just been a bit unfortunate so far. And they didn't look, although Spurs didn't play well, they didn't look like a team that are going to be really, really uncomfortable in this league. They can definitely get results and be competitive. So I think we're in a league, Chris, at the minute where there's no outstanding team, because I watched an outstanding team last night in PSG. I mean, Barcelona put them under real pressure first 30 minutes, but PSG their first choice front three of Kvaratskhelia, Doué, and Dembele, and also their captain and Marquinhos. 4 key players going to the new camp, and they were pushing for a lip winner, and they got it. So I think that's the standard around Europe at the moment, Chris, is PSG, Barcelona. I don't see any team in the Premier League at the moment at those kind of levels.
Gareth, what have you made of league leaders Liverpool this week? Because, of course, we did predict a Crystal Palace win, as you mentioned, last weekend. But, of course, they lost their Champions League game at Galatasaray as well.
Yeah, it was a bad week for Liverpool, but I think Jamie Carragher nailed it. He said this has been a week like this has been coming since the start of the season. Even dating back the pre-season, the Community Shield, the amount of goals they're conceding, the amount of big chances they're. They conceded 7 big chances, big value chances in that game against Crystal Palace, which is the most conceded by any Premier League team this season in a single game. So, I mean, they could have easily been 4-0 down in the first half. It was an unbelievable, let's not discredit Palace, it was an unbelievable tactical plan and executed to perfection by the manager, Oliver Glasner, who again is being linked with a Man United job this week. And that's not going to go away at the moment. I mean, the only thing that let Palace down was their finishing, because, I mean, they could have been out of sight in this game. And I think, when you look at these unbeaten runs of Palace being on a run of 18 games unbeaten, the only reason they haven't turned more draws than they wins is their finishing. They've been better team in most of those games. And I thought Liverpool were going to go on there. We said it was going to be a very, very difficult game, and it was a lot closer than it should have been. Palace were excellent. Then Liverpool move on to Galatasaray, and Chris, you were there last year. English teams don't usually enjoy going to Galatasaray, so it always had the meanings of a very difficult game. And Galatasaray again could have been out of sight in the first half. So Liverpool at the moment they're a bit like, I don't want to compare them to Spurs because of course they're the Premier League champions, but it does remind you of last year with Spurs that seemed very, very easy to play against. Yes, they had some good results early in the season, but they're conceding that many chances in games that eventually that was going to turn. And I know we'll speak about Spurs in a minute, Chris. We're getting some results at the moment, but the performances don't feel a lot of optimism. And Liverpool's results were a lot better than their performances merited. And as Jamie Carragher rightly pointed out, if you keep playing like this week in, week out, you're going to start dropping points and losing games. And I think this now is a massive game for both teams on Saturday at 5:30. Chelsea-Liverpool. Maresca's under a little bit of pressure. Arne Slot, I don't think he's lost 3 games in a row at Liverpool since he's been there. And we're already seeing that steady ship that Klopp put in place for Slot. Yes, he done a brilliant job managing it. But the first signs of change, bringing in these new players, can he get them all working together? At the moment, you would have to say on performance levels, Liverpool they look worse than last year, despite all this money spent. And that's a problem for Slot to manage. It's almost like you put 2 ingredients into a dish. You can confuse the dish, and it may be just a bit funny. At the moment, Liverpool are having massive issues with Florian Wirtz, fitting him into the team. They played him on the right, they played him on the left, they played him in midfield. Does he have to come out of the team? He's dropped Salah. That's unusual, dropping your Salah, but he hasn't started the season. So he's been playing right back, who's a midfielder. Frimpong, who's been signed as a right back, is playing right wing. seems at the minute that Slot's confused himself with his tactics, and I think this is a very intriguing game on Saturday between these two teams.
Gareth, before we get on to the predictions, I suppose I'll just ask you about the statement win from Arsenal at Newcastle on Sunday, a 96th minute winner at St James's Park.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a brilliant game to watch. Not necessarily. I thought Arsenal played well in the first half, but I just thought it was a throwback game. It was really physical. There's a lot of needle in the game. Both managers were animated on the sideline. The penalty, like we said, was one of the many VAR calls that was disputed over the weekend. For me, I thought it was a penalty. I mean, yes, Pope does get contact, but I think the fall through completely wipes out Gyökeres. I think they've got that wrong. And if the referee actually gives the decision, so I mean, is that a clear and obvious error by their terms? I'm not sure. Hard Web backed it up on the Monday Night Show, says that it was a great decision by VAR. I'm undecided about that. But the one thing I would say with that, Chris, you were at the Man City game, and there was a very similar incident where James Trafford made contact with a ball just before he wiped Kudus out, and that was deemed okay. So there is a bit of consistency there with that.
Yeah.
We've seen two incidents like that, and they've gone the same way. So, but for me, they were both penalties. Or if the Kudus one was just outside the box, it was a free kick in a red yard. So I'll be consistent on this is at the time, free kick, red yard, and this incident, even though it was Arsenal, for me, it was a penalty. So I think they've got that wrong. But, Arsenal were excellent in the first half. Trossard hit the post. They played some really, really good football. And Newcastle get the goal in front. And you think, is it going to be the same story for Arsenal again? But I have to say, once they got back, they 1-1. I kind of felt they were going to go on and win the game. And they did at the end. And we've seen this. How many times have we seen this now where Gabriel pops up with a massive goal? And look, set pieces seems to be very, very heavily focused on this season. Yes, Arsenal were good at it last year. Brentford have obviously been good at it under Thomas Frank, but there seems to be more and more teams this year. I would say 80 to 90% of teams are going long through every opportunity. Corners are going towards the back post and top of the goalkeeper. Very few short corners anymore. So as the style of English football changing at the moment, I think it is. But Chris, I think the amount of teams winning with set piece goals makes it a more competitive league because we're not seeing any outstanding football teams consistently every week. So I think you're going to see a lot of games where, I didn't expect that result. I didn't expect, at the moment, I just think teams are very capable of getting results anywhere. And I'll reference that game last night. It was an absolute pleasure to watch Barcelona and PSG last night because every time there was a free kick in the pitch, and I thought Michael Oliver refereed it very well. He gets a lot of criticism, but I thought he let the game take centre stage last night. Every time, Chris, there was a player fouled, as soon as it happened, a PSG or Barcelona player put their hand on the ball and played it really quick. So it was an end-to-end, really, really good flow to the game. Most of the corners were taken very, very quickly. I think the frustration at the moment with fans, Chris, is it's taken maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes for teams to play a long throw or a corner now. So it seems to kill the momentum of the game. And I think Paul Merson, to his credit this week, says that I'm just not enjoying watching the football between VAR and the amount of set pieces that are coming in and coaches looking to organise. You see the set piece coaches and all the teams trying to organise as soon as they're defending one or attacking one. It seems to take forever to get the ball and they play. And I just don't think it makes for a very good flow of a game. It's very stop-start. And I think it'll actually benefit the weaker teams in the league because they'll take that all day as opposed to a team that are maybe superior. But they're buying into these tactics. So I think over the next few weeks, it'll be interesting to see if we see teams pivot away from this heavy focus on doing a really good set piece.
Gareth, just a very quick one before we get on to the first game. Which team have you been most impressed with so far this season, and which team have you been most disappointed with?
From a neutral point of view, I'll give you both answers. Crystal Palace have been the most impressive team by far. I think with what they have in terms of their ability as players, I think the manager's outperforming expectations. I mean, this is a manager that lost his star player in Eredivisie Eze. He had to deal with the Gahey situation, which was awkward because he didn't make a fuss about wanting to go, but it was clear he wanted to go. After deadline day, we heard reports that he was very upset about it. But he's managed to get him back on side. Gahey looks like nothing ever happened. So I think he's a very, very good man manager and a very good tactician. And I thought what he did to Aston Villa away from home 3-0, beating Liverpool at home, who had won their first 5 games, or how they were playing, it was still a team that were and the groove of winning games. They go and won that game quite convincingly, even though it was only 2-1. This long unbeaten record, getting through in Europe to the next stage, I think that's clear that the clear trendsetters at the moment in terms of overperformance. Yes, I think Sunderland have been excellent. And pains me to say because I'm not a big fan of this player, but I think Granit Xhaka has been brilliant for Sunderland. The performance at Nottingham Forest last week, they limited Nottingham Forest. They 1 or 2 big chances in the whole game, which came quite lit from Chris Wood. And Forest have a lot of talent. So I think the likes of Leeds, Burnley, and Sunderland are making. We've said this over the last few weeks, Chris, are making this league far more competitive. And it's made the likes of West Ham panic and go, we need to get rid of this manager now because, last year there was 2 or 3 teams struggling very early on. I was looking, I think Sunderland are only a couple of points away from matching Southampton's total for the whole of last season. So that shows you the competitive nature of this league. So brilliant. In terms of teams that I don't think have Liverpool, I think in terms of performance have not been what you would expect. Every game's a real battle. They've been second best in a lot of those games. I've seen XG philosophy put up on X, Chris, that you can't outrun XG. And that's showing this week with Liverpool. I mean, they should be 9th in the table based on chances against and for. So that tells you everything. I think West Ham have to come in that category, Chris, because, we do have a bit of banter with them, but they're still a big club in this league, and they'd be so poor in the game. I mean, they've been the team that have lost the most games. You think about Chelsea beating them 5-1, Sunderland beating them 3-0, Spurs beating them 3-0. They've been a lot of the games they haven't been competitive on. So I'd say West Ham would definitely take that mantle at the moment.
Right, Gareth, let's get into it. So the first game will take place on Friday evening. Bournemouth will host Fulham. Now, Bournemouth are currently 6th in the table. Fulham are 11th. Now, Bournemouth last weekend drew 2-2 away at Leeds at Ellen Road. And Fulham lost 3-1 away at Aston Villa. What have you made of both of these sides so far this campaign? Because Bournemouth have started well, haven't they? I know we've spoken about it on previous episodes. They lost 4 out of their back 5 in the summer, and Iriola just seems to be doing a great job there.
He is doing a great job, Chris, but if you remember last week, we were speaking about this game and we were saying this will be a real test for Bournemouth in terms of where they can be this season, because we know Bournemouth on their day can beat anyone, but can they find that consistency? And they give away a late goal. They drop 2 points away at Leeds. And we know Leeds is a different Leeds this year. They're going to be more competitive, and Spurs is going to find that out on Saturday, that this is the Elsas and the Jesse Marches are going to open up and play, you have a shot, we have a shot. They're going to be compact and difficult to break down them. Credit to Bournemouth to go there and score 2 goals, because Leeds were unbeaten at home. And they found a way. Leeds at the end, they make sure they stayed unbeaten. And I think that's a big blow for Bournemouth, because with so many teams at the minute not finding the consistency, it would help Bournemouth if they could get some early consistency to give them a wee bit of a cushion if they're going to push for a European spot. Because if they can't really break away when the teams around them are dropping points, will they be able to sustain that when the other teams get better? So Bournemouth over the next few weeks will definitely be trying to get maximise their points to give them a head start. Because, Chris, we know how valuable a head start can be. You think about that first season under Ange, where Spurs weren't really great from November to the back end of the season. They may, but they still finished 5th in the league because they had such a good first 10 games. They had a cushion, and they only missed out in top 4 by 2 points. So, if Bournemouth can get themselves onto a really good run, if you can give yourself a 9 or 10 point cushion, you can nearly allow for the odd bad result here and there. So it'll be interesting to see if Bournemouth can bounce back. We know they're a strong team at home. I watched the Aston Villa and Fulham game on Sunday before the Newcastle Arsenal game, and Fulham started really well, and you were thinking, Villa, this could be a real tough game for Emery because there's pressure on him going into the game. He scored an early goal, but once again, Chris, and I know Marco Silva can be very unhappy, and he's not afraid to voice his frustration with referees, but I think they've been on the wrong end of a few bad calls early on. You think about the Chelsea game, the game's 0-0, Fulham are in the ascendancy, goal chalked off, which they were then apologised for by Howard Webb. They gave a foul when it was an accidental contact, and that was a big goal right before half-time that would have put Fulham 1-0 up at Stamford Bridge, and we know Chelsea do struggle when they're coming from behind. And then you move on to this game at the weekend, and Fulham are 1-0 up, and they have 2 penalty shouts not given, and for me, at least one of them has to be given. The first one, I think Josh King, he tries to be too clever. He knows that Martinez is going to come in, and instead of just letting him take him out, he tries to jump over him a wee bit, and because he's going down, the referee has decided not to give it, and that was with VAR. Then sort of gave the referee in the review that the player was already going down before the contact was there. And the second one for me, the handball, because the handball thing is starting to frustrate a lot of fans because, up until the last year, we were always told if your arm was in your unnatural position or away from your body or making yourself bigger, it's given as handball. We've seen two last weekend with Matty Cash in this game and Gabriel in the Newcastle game, which would have been given last year, but they appeared not to be given in this year due to different things. They're saying about close proximity, but what is close enough and what isn't close enough. We're talking about millimeters here. For me, Josh King's shot is on target. It's going to give Martinez a problem. Matty Cash has got his arm away from his body. And yes, Josh King's put a lot of power in the shot, but it's blocked the shot on goal. And for me, it's careless from Cash and very, very fortunate to get away with it. And I think if Fulham go 2-0 up in this game, it's a different game. So I think Fulham can count themselves unlucky that they haven't got more points based on their performances and based on the decisions going against them. And just like in the Newcastle Arsenal game, I thought the Gabriel one was a real chance of being a penalty. And Gary Neville says that in commentary at the time, and they didn't give it in the end. So it'll be interesting to see over the next few weeks how this handball thing goes, because it seems to be, Chris, the handball is the biggest issue for consistency in the league. 1 week you could see a very similar incident given, and the next week it's not. And as fans, we all want to be treated fairly, Chris, don't we? Nobody wants to lose a game based on a dodgy handball. So at the minute, I'm not sure what handball is, and we don't know what handball is for a number of years, but it seemed to clarify itself last year. But again, now it seems to have changed again into a grey area. It's a very, very grey area. It's one of the things that football needs to fix at the moment, I think.
Yeah, well said. Now, some match facts for Bournemouth against Fulham. Bournemouth have lost just 2 of their last 16 league meetings with Fulham, winning 8 and drawing 6. And just 1 of their last 8, winning 3 and drawing 4, going down 3-1 back in February 2024. And Fulham have lost each of their last 3 Premier League visits to Bournemouth, while they could lose 4 successive away games against the Cherries for the very first time. I didn't need those stats really, Gareth, to predict a Bournemouth win. I'm going to go for 2-1 home win.
Yeah, I'm going for a 3-1 Bournemouth win, just because Bournemouth are so strong at home, and Fulham are usually poor travellers, and they don't usually get most of their points at home. So I think a home win here is definitely the way to go.
Right, this is where the majority of our time will be taken, this next game. The early kick-off, Saturday. It's before an international break, as you mentioned earlier. 12:30 kick-off, Elland Road, Leeds United v Spurs. First of all, let's talk about the home side, Leeds United. What have you made of them so far this season in the opening 6 games? Because they're currently sitting in 12th place.
From what I've seen of Leeds, Chris, this is going to be a very, very difficult test for Spurs, because at home they seem to be really competitive, really resilient. And they didn't concede against Everton at home. They didn't concede against Newcastle at home. And then they battled back for a 2-2 draw against Bournemouth. So when you look at those games at home, Everton's not an easy game. Newcastle game. And the way Bournemouth have been playing, and Bournemouth beat us at our place, that was a very difficult game. So I think for Leeds to get 5 points out of those 3 games is really impressive. And I think because their fans are enjoying it at home, and because the players would have gained confidence from their performances as well, this makes it even a more difficult game. So I think Leeds we said already, Chris, that home form is going to be key for Leeds. I don't expect them to get as many points away from home, but I think at home they're going to be a very tough game for most teams. So no, I expect a really, really tough test for Spurs, or any team that was going here on Saturday, I think, would find it tough.
Gareth, what have you made of Tottenham in these last few weeks? Because in 17 days, we've played 6 games. Now, the fan base, I believe, and the people that I talk to on a regular basis, day in, day out, and the away games certainly just returned from Norway last night. In those 17 days, we've played 6 games, we've won 3, we've drawn 3, we've had to come back against Wolves last weekend. The weekend before, we had to come back against Brighton. And, of course, Bodo, we were 2-0 down on Tuesday. We come back to draw 2-2. What have you made of the football under Thomas Frank right now? Because I've seen a lot of criticism aimed at Thomas Frank in these last few days.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, because I think we had a really, really good start to the season. I think there was a lot of positivity after the PSG game. Yes, we lost on penalties, but it was a really, really good performance. Getting 1-1 against Burnley, 3 goals at home, great way to start the season. Man City away, I think most people were expecting a really tough game, but Spurs really controlled that game and played really, really well. And I think everyone's just expecting lift-off, and then we have that stumbling block against Bournemouth. Fair enough, you get off with that, it's a one-off. Bournemouth, then you go international break, West Ham away, big game, haven't won there for a number of years, since 2019, I believe. Going 1-3-0. Yes, West Ham are struggling, but we know they always up their game for Spurs. And I think everything was going really well. The Villarreal game at home, I think, is where fans started to become a bit concerned. Even though we won the game, didn't really create a lot in the game. An own goal early on, won it. Brighton away, I think, despite we give away 2 goals at the start, I think that was probably our best performance in the Premier League alongside the Man City one. I think we definitely deserve to come back and get our point. Doncaster, I don't think anyone's reading into that game at all. It felt like a pre-season game to me. It was a lot of changes, yes, but fair enough, got a 3-0 one, but I wouldn't really read too much into that game. I think the last few days is where fans have become frustrated. I think, I don't know, maybe this is maybe Spurs fans getting excited or maybe reading into the league table, but Wolves are definitely not as poor, and we said this last week, Chris, they're not as poor as the table suggests. They're a proven Premier League team. We have a very good manager like Vitor Pereira, like we know what job he did there last year. He switched from a back 4 to a back 5, so he's a very flexible manager. It was never going to be an easy game. I think where Spurs made it, they didn't get that goal in the first half when they were on top. Wolves made that tactical change at half-time with a back 5, and Spurs really struggled. They coped with that new change in system. They also made some good changes, and I think there's a lot of Wolves players out there to prove a point, because I think he made 9 changes from his last Premier League game. I think it was a Premier League record since for years gone by. It's been years since a team ever made 9 changes. So you talk about new players coming in trying to make an impact, and I thought Wolves, to their credit, were outstanding, but I think the constant theme that fans are worried about, we've seen it against Bournemouth at home, we've seen it against Villarreal, we've seen it against Wolves, we've seen it against Glunt on Tuesday night, is the lack of desire to get on the ball and the lack of confidence, the lack of bravery to try and play through the thirds, try and break teams down. It seems to be, let's get the ball up the pitch as quickly as possible, let's get a long through the box, let's get a set piece, or even get the ball wide to Kudos or Porro and let him swing across in. And I think at the minute, it's where we look the most dangerous, but I think that's where fans are concerned that, we look really, really limited in our build-up play and relying a lot on our crosses and relying a lot on set pieces to score goals and create chances. And I think that's the other thing, Chris, as well. Yes, we've scored some goals, but I think apart from Odegaard's header and the one that Richarlison had in the first half where he didn't expect it, I think we created 4 chances against Bodo. Against Wolves, in the first half, we created the one that Kudos at the bar. There was a couple went into the box that were near misses. And the second half, Polina was the only one that created and it wasn't really a chance. It was a great finish from the edge of the box. We didn't really create or ask any questions of Wolves. So I think at the minute, their conversion rate's been very, very good. We're not creating enough chances, Chris, and I think we've spoke about this with Liverpool. If Spurs continue along this line, it's going to be very difficult for them to win games. And the one thing that I would point out, we conceded 2 goals against Brighton and 2 goals against Bodo Glimt. So those early season games where we weren't conceding goals and weren't conceding as many chances, we seem to be creating, and we seem to be more chances against now in the last few games. I mean, Bodo missed a penalty, hit the crossbar. There was a chance in the first half, 6 yards out, where he put it over the bar. I think in a Premier League game, a Premier League player scores that. So Bodo were cutting through us at times, and we looked absolutely shell-shocked. And look, just credit Bodo Glimt. It was their big night at home. They were very, very good in possession of the ball. But this isn't PSG or Barcelona. This is Bodo Glimt, the Norwegian team, and they absolutely played Spurs off the pitch. I mean, I was looking at some of their patterns, some of the connections, some really, really good stuff they played. And I know you could point to them being together a long time, but you wouldn't put them in the same caliber as some of our players. Always they will be in the Premier League playing football. So, I mean, credit to them. We know it's a tough place to go, and we know they've got a great home record there. But I was so surprised, Chris, how one-sided the game was. We're not talking about a 10 or 15-minute spell. Spurs were dominated for about 70 to 75 minutes of that game. So, I mean, that is a real, real worry that Thomas Frank wasn't able to change it. The players looked either reluctant to get on the ball and play because of the tactics that was being asked, or didn't have the confidence to do it. And if they don't have the confidence to do it, that will be a real, real, real concern, because there's more than enough quality in that Spurs team to create opportunities from open play.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you've just said there. Just to come back to you on a couple of points, did Thomas Frank get the team selection right on Tuesday against Bodo Glimt? Because I think it's fair to say that the two best players probably this season for Tottenham in all competitions, João Palhinha and Mohamed Kudus, both of them were on the bench. Did Thomas Frank have this game in mind on for Saturday's game against Leeds to be featuring them and starting them too? Because defensively, as you just said, João Palhinha, if he was in that team on Tuesday, I feel like a lot of that would have been stopped early on. And Mohamed Kudus, with the lack of creativity in the team. And also, it's worth mentioning that Richarlison only had 10 touches in that game in Norway. That is not good enough. How do we get Richarlison into the game a little bit more? Because I think it's fair to say that he's going to play and feature and even start the game at Leeds on Saturday, because Kolo Muani, it looks like he's still out. Dominic Solanke, of course, he announced on Instagram last night that he's just undergone minor surgery, so he's going to be out for some time as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll give Thomas credit for is he's not afraid to rotate the squad, and I think he's probably looked at what happened last year with Spurs and the amount of injuries they had. We've already got a few significant injuries, especially in the creative area with James Maddison, Kulusevski, Dragoson's injured as well. He's trying to find his way back. He's only really got Ben Davies has been injured. He's only really got Danzo, Romero, Van de Ven. He can't play Romero and Van de Ven every week, even if he would like to. So he has to rotate. Palhinha and Kudus, like you say, have been excellent for us. But again, I think the plastic patch, the amount of water on it, and look, that may have had something to do with the performance, but we've seen this before in our game, so it wasn't just on Tuesday night as what's concerning fans. The pitch probably didn't help, and they were used to it, but I think maybe that played a part, with the one of the injuries on it. I think that's the positive about Tuesday, Chris. We managed to battle back, get a result, and didn't lose anyone to any injuries that played in the game. But in regards to, you were saying there, Chris, about Richarlison, I feel like I'm sticking up for him all the time. And look, I'm not Richarlison's biggest fan. But Chris, you go and play up front with the tactics that Spurs employed on Tuesday night, you will struggle, because all he had was long balls up him, and they weren't actually balls of trying to pick him out. A lot of the time, a lot of the players were just putting their foot through the ball and kicking it forward. So I don't think he had a lot of service. I think he was chasing lost causes at times. I think you put Solanke in there, or even Muani in there, I think they would struggle. And how Spurs were so deep at times in that first half and the start of the second half that you couldn't really get anyone on the ball high up on the pitch to affect it. So look, yes, he has to do better. Yes, it's not been good enough in certain games, but I do think he's a scapegoat, Chris, for this fan base. It was Davinson Sanchez, it was Emerson Royale, and now it's Richarlison. Richarlison is not the root of all our problems. Yes, do you think he's good enough to be Spurs' first choice striker? But I don't think it's all his fault at the moment, what's happening. I think a lot of the problems are in midfield at the moment. And I think a lot of the problems, Chris, I see to say, Arnie, I don't think it's a selection issue. I think it's a tactical issue. When you look at it, when the defenders have the ball, we seem to have, all right, maybe Palhinha or Bentancur are quite deep, but Sarr or Bergville, whoever's on, those two seem to be very high up the pitch. The two wide men seem to be very, very high. So it looks to me pretty much like Thomas Frank has told them, let's try and get the ball forward as quickly as possible and try and maybe won the ball high up the pitch in a press. We've seen Sarr do it at Man City, and try and how much the ball's in our half. But the biggest issue with that, Chris, is at the moment you look at our front three. Kudus isn't renowned for winning headers. Odegaard's been playing there. Johnson, they're not the most physical players. Richarlison, yes, can do it, but I think at the minute when the ball goes up there, there's a lot of centre halves that are feeling comfortable dealing with what we have up there. So I really think we need to get back to getting the ball down on the ground and being a bit braver. And look, if we can see goals doing that, at least the fans will see. We're trying to play it at the moment. I think the frustration with the fans are not enjoying the football, Chris. I mean, you were there on Tuesday night. You made a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money to go out there, and for 70 minutes, you would have been as well watching a Bodo Glimt training session because Spurs didn't compete in the game at all. They were hanging on. They were getting fortunate. We missed chances. And I have to say, we were absolutely blessed to get a point against Wolves based on the second half performance, and blessed to get a point in this game because we deserved absolutely nothing. And I think that'll be the concern moving forward, is if we go to Leeds at the weekend and we're second best and manage to get a draw, Well, at the end of the day, right? Yes, I've seen fans going, "Oh, we've only lost one game all season," but I mean, draws don't get you very far in this league. You need to be able to win games and win games well. So that'll be the concern. But look, taking all that aside, if we do beat Leeds on Saturday, whatever, even if we don't play well and we get a result, I think it's been a very, very good start to the season because you'll be in the top four after 7 games. You will be 4 points out of 6 in the Champions League into the next round of the League Cup. So in terms of on paper, it looks very, very good. But Chris, I would point out that, I used to get a lot of criticism on your show when I says, I wasn't enjoying it under Antonio Conte. And I remember we made a really good start in Antonio Conte's first full season. I think we got 22 or 23 points after 10 games. And the performances were pretty terrible to watch. And you kind of felt that we were getting a bit fortunate. And that unraveled pretty quickly. So that is my worry, that as this style of football sustainable, Blunt performance going to get us points more weeks than not. We're more likely to lose games playing like that. And I think there needs to be a lot more impetus on our attack and play. But look, there's still issues there. I mean, Xavi Simons is an issue at the moment, because we've seen this with Florian Wirtz, Chris. Arne Slot shoehorning him onto the left and to the right, trying to play him just to fit him onto a team. For me, at the minute, Xavi Simons has got to play in his role as a number 10 or else not play at all. I don't think it helps anyone if he's stuck out there on that left side at the moment because, one, our wingers at the minute are being told to get the ball into the box, so he's not really going to get the chance to beat people and play. Look, we're not dominant possession where Simons can drop in and link up and, play little passes. At the minute, our wingers are being told, get the ball into the box immediately. So that's not going to suit Xavi Simons. So for me, he's got to play in that 10. And I think Xavi's, yes, he's not been good enough at times in the games, but this style of football does not suit Xavi Simons. He needs to be in a possession-based team, not a team that's trying to play counter-attack and set pieces.
Yeah, I agree. A couple of points, though, of what you said there about our results and certainly going down. We can't continue this because, yes, we've come back to fight 3 times when we've got a point, twice in the Premier League in last weekend, the weekend before, and of course Champions League on Tuesday. But as Thomas Frank has said on many occasions, it is about mentality and to come back and fight back. And if you can't win a game, don't lose the game. And when we think about previous seasons under Ange Postecoglou and various other managers for that matter, people very often use that term Dr. Tottenham or Spursy, but we haven't lost those games. It's not ideal, and of course we should be winning these games at home, certainly against Wolves. But like Thomas Frank said, if you're not going to win it, don't lose it either. Now,
Chris, it's frustrating because at the moment, just before you move on, there is an opportunity there in the Premier League at the moment.
Yeah.
Must put their stamp on this league completely. So there is an opportunity here for, like I said to you, Chris, a few weeks ago. I do think this is the season. I don't see an outsider complete. Maybe not winning it. I don't see a Leicester type season, even though Crystal Palace are doing well. But I do think that you see Newcastle won 4-0 last night. I expect them to improve. I do think there is an opportunity for a Spurs or a Newcastle to put together a bit of a challenge because I don't think Liverpool, everything's well there. Arsenal, yes, they're a strong team, but we know at home at times, Mark Arteta's tactics can hinder results and they draw a lot of games. So I do think at the moment there is an opportunity for teams to get involved. And if you turn the Wolves on the 3 points and you turn Brighton on the 3 points, we're sitting at the top of the league here at the minute. We out really playing our best. So there is an opportunity at the minute, and I think that's where fans.
Yeah.
I think this game on Saturday, Chris, is key to our early start to the season. I think if we go and beat Leeds, people will view it as a very, very positive start. If we don't go and win, people are going to say, well, that's 3 draws in a row in the Premier League when we've won a game since we beat West Ham. So that'll be this is a big game.
And it's a big thing as well because before international breaks, our record is abysmal. Now,
first as well. Second game in the weekend, so we play pretty early in the weekend.
Yeah. Now, the last couple of visits to Ellen Road, Spurs have put 4 past Leeds. Back in Feb 2022, we won 4-0. And in May 2023, we beat them 4-1. Now, Leeds United have lost 9 of their last 11 Premier League games against Tottenham, winning 1 and drawing 1, including each of their last 4 in a row, their longest ever league losing run to Tottenham. And Spurs have won both of their last 2 league visits to Ellen Road, as I mentioned, and could beat Leeds away from home 3 times running in the league for the very first time in our history. Gareth, I'm going to go for a 2-1 Spurs win. I'm hoping that we go there with real intent, and we obviously get the 3 points, and we go into the international break with a smile on our face. What are you
Yeah,
going for?
definitely. Chris, I'm going to go. I'm going to revert back to the green that it says about 12:30 kickoffs. Notoriously are low-scoring games. I know last week was a bit of an anomaly, so I'm going to go for a 1-0 Spurs one.
Okay, let's hope that Spurs can get the 3 points at Ellen Road. Right, let's crack through some of these other Saturday games now. Arsenal host West Ham United. Of course, Nuno Espirito Santo has just taken over at West Ham. He went to Everton. I think he only took 2 training sessions, but they looked a different side under Nuno straight away, and they got a 1-1 draw. Arsenal, of course, they had a great result last weekend. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I mean it's a funny game because you would have looked at this game last week and thought this will be the end for Graham Potter if he makes it through to this, because the way they're defending, Arsenal could absolutely smash them like they smashed Leeds at home. But I think this is a different kind of game now because we know Nuno is a master organizer, and they did look a lot more organised against Everton. And if you that second half performance, especially Chris, they were the team pushing for the winner at the end at Everton, who've been very, very good this season. So I think you see the smile back on Jarrod Bowen's face. He seems to be happier already. And we know Nuno is very good at tuning the teams very early on. He went Dundee Forest mid-season and picked up their results quite quickly. And I expect them to do the same at West Ham. I think over the next few weeks, West Ham might be one of those teams they watch out for in like the new manager bounce. I don't know, Chris. I didn't see the Arsenal game last night. I did watch the highlights back, and Olympi Icos created some good chances in that game. So, Arsenal didn't look as bulletproof as they have in recent games. I think at home, Arsenal it could be a bit more vulnerable because I think the onus is pretty much on Arsenal to go and create. And we know West Ham have got Jarrod Bowen and Somerville who are very good in counter-attack situations. So I think if West Ham can deal with the set pieces, because we know they've struggled with set pieces this year, but under Nuno, I expect them to be going through that quite rigidly this weekend, rigorously, because we know Arsenal are the strongest team in the league at set pieces. So I think if West Ham make sure they don't concede any goals from set pieces, they'll ask Arsenal some questions on the counter-attack. But I just think Arsenal will find a way. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Arsenal one.
West Ham actually won this fixture at the Emirates 1-0 back in Feb 2025. The 2 games before that, Arsenal put 11 past them, beating them 5-2 back in November 24 and 6-0 in February 2024. Sorry, Gareth, what was your score prediction? 2-1?
2-1 Arsenal, just there.
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I think Nuno's going to make it very difficult for them. 1-1. Next up, Manchester United against Sunderland. This is the game. It's games like this. I know, Sunderland have had a decent start so far to the Premier League campaign. They're actually in 5th after 6 games. Manchester United are down in 14th. But when you think of newly promoted sides, Manchester United at home at Old Trafford, every Manchester United fan would be walking to Old Trafford expecting to win that game. But if they don't, Gareth, Ruben Amorim, and you mentioned Oliver Glasner earlier. Oliver Glasner seems to be linked to the Manchester United job. The job that he has done at Selhurst Park. I suppose if Manchester United come calling, although it's not worked out, with lots of managers since Alex Ferguson left the football club. I know a couple of them won trophies, but in terms of league competition, it certainly hasn't worked out for them. They've spent a lot of money. They had a good window in the summer. You would expect a lot more from Manchester United. I've spoken to a number of Manchester United fans as well, and a lot of them say things just don't improve week by week, and that is their big frustration. But Amorim surely has got to be winning this game at home.
I don't think you can phrase this game in any other way than it being it's a cup final for Ruben Amorim. Failure to get a result here, and I think that will probably be it because we are at an international break. You look at their next 4 games before the next international break: Liverpool away, Nottingham Forest away, Spurs away, and I think that they've got a home game in there, but sandwiched in between against Brighton. So that is 4 really difficult games. We know the record at Anfield's been awful for the last 10 years. They haven't won there since Wayne Rooney scored a winner in Klopp's first season. So that's how far back it's been since they won at Anfield. Spurs has been an absolute nightmare for them. United always used to beat Spurs, but over the last number of years, that's changed. United now seem to struggle again. We know Forest away is a tough game. That could potentially be a big game for Ange if things don't improve as well. I'll speak about Forest, I'm sure, later on. And Brighton at home. Brighton have an unbelievable record at Old Trafford. I mean, incredible, the record they have at Old Trafford. So I think those 4 games, it's hard to see on current form how he could survive that. So I think this will be it. He may buy himself an hour game or two if he was to get a 1 against Sunderland. But I think anything other than a 1, and that will probably be it. We know Man United are reluctant to change because they've done this before mid-season and it hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's ever been this bad in terms of the continuity of poor results. At the minute, you would have to say they're looking like a bottom half team, and that just can't be accepted. Under Louis van Gaal and Solskjaer, yes, there was poor times, but they were still in the top half of the table or finishing maybe in the Europa League places, or so it wasn't like they were. Ruben Amorim hasn't won back-to-back Premier League games since he's been there, and he's there 11 months. So if you can't win back-to-back games in the Premier League, you're never going to get too far in terms of the table. So it's a huge game. I think Sunderland will be absolutely looking forward to it. I mean, they know the pressure on Man United is going to be severe going into this game. Sunderland are riding the crest of a wave at the moment. They've just gone to Nottingham Forest and picked up all 3 points. Their fans are saying this is one. And Chris, I'll actually bring Sunderland under what I'm going to say about Oliver Glasner, because I remember watching the Sunderland Till I Die documentary, and Sunderland were an absolute mess after they got relegated. And Simon Grayson took the job, and he says every manager believes they can be that man to change the fortunes of a club, and it'll be the same feeling that Oliver Glasner will feel if Man United come calling, because Man United come calling, they only come calling once, and we've seen that with Ruben Amorim. He wanted to wait until the end of the season. He ended up forcing himself and they taking it because of the size of the club. Oliver Glasner will not turn down Manchester United. I'm sorry to say, Crystal Palace fans, he just won't. He will believe that he can be that man that changes Man United. And the more failure that Man United have, Chris, the more attractive I think the job becomes, because the standards have never been lower at Man United now. I mean, you come on now and won back-to-back games, you're a hero. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is it. They haven't seen back-to-back ones for nearly a year. So it's one that I think we have to keep an eye on. I think what's quite interesting is this week, Chris, that the reports seem to have really ramped up, and that tells you that there's some contingency planning being put in place here. And I think that it will all evolve around Saturday and in this Sunderland game. So huge game. I don't know. I think it's going to be super tight. I don't see United putting anyone's fears to bed and going out and smashing Sunderland. I think it'll be a really, really tight. But it's one for Ruben Amorim, and I think Ruben Amorim will know this deep down. If he wants to be Man United manager after an international break, he's got to win this game by hook or by crook.
Well, the last 2 away games for Sunderland, they went to Selhurst Park against Palace and got a 0-0 draw. And, of course, last weekend they went to Ange Postecoglou's Nottingham Forest and got a 1-0 win. So 2 fantastic results for them on the road. Now, head-to-head, all competitions played 124. Manchester United winning 59. Sunderland winning 37 and 28 of them finishing as a draw. Manchester United have lost just 2 of their last 30 league games against Sunderland, winning 22, drawing 6, with this their first since a 3-0 win back in April 2017. I don't know whether I'm going to surprise you or not, Gareth, here, but I'm going to go for a 1-0 Sunderland win.
I'm actually going for a 1-1 draw.
No.
It'll be a 1-0 either way, or a 2-1 either way, or a draw. I don't see it being loads of goals in it. I think this is actually the 3:00 game on Premier Sports, so I'm going to see this game on Saturday on the TV, and it'll be interesting to see just before kickoff how the fans are, because I think they're going to be very, very nervous about this game.
Right, the 5:30 kickoff on Saturday. Chelsea host Liverpool. Of course, league leaders at the moment, lost to Crystal Palace last weekend. Chelsea also lost last weekend at home against Brighton. Chelsea are 8th. Liverpool, of course, are 1st. Chelsea have scored 11 in 11 in the first 6 games in the Premier League this season. Liverpool have scored 12. Gareth, how do you see this one going? Last season, back in May, at the end of the season, Chelsea won this one 3-1. you've mentioned about Liverpool so far, about the performances haven't been great, but they've still been getting a number of points in the Premier League. Chelsea, where do you see them at the moment?
I think Chelsea are still a team, and they seem to be going through a game which they look quite settled at times last year. They look to be going through like an hour kind of phase of rebuilding. You know, so many players have left the club, and new players have arrived, and it just seems like every summer Chelsea are chasing their tail because they're moving so many players out the door and bringing new ones in. Look, I don't know what the general feeling of Nicholas Jackson is in the Chelsea camp, but I think that was absolutely crazy letting him go, because he did score goals. Yes, he did miss chances, but he scored goals, and some big goals for Chelsea. He's scoring for Bayern Munich now in the Champions League. He actually played alongside Harry Kane on Tuesday or Wednesday night. I can't remember which night they played. They won 5-1. And at the moment, they've got an injury to João Pedro, and they've got no striker apart from Tyreek George. They play in there. He's a young kid, and you're just thinking, where was the value in letting Jackson go on loan? They Bayern Munich. It was crazy. I can't understand that, because it looks pretty much to me like Chelsea are bringing players in. They sell them on for bigger values.
That was a funny one, Gareth, wasn't it? Because he was going, then it was called off, then he was going again, and it was called off, and then he went. He finally went.
From what I understand, Bayern Munich agreed a 15 million record loan deal for him, with an option that we have view making it permanent, and then Chelsea pulled it because of the injuries they had. They lay him to lap, and then I think Bayern Munich went back with an 3 million and said we'll give you 18 million on loan now, and they accepted it. So they changed their mind over 3 million, which was crazy. Now I know there is an obligation to buy. I think it's around 70 million. So I think it's a business decision. They're looking and going, we've got 8 in for a player we don't really believe is worth that. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you don't get into the Champions League because you don't score enough goals, well, he is worth that day. And I think Chelsea have left themselves vulnerable. João Pedro's injured. Liam Delap's got a long-term injury. And they're relying on George up front, who is pretty new to the league and pretty inexperienced. And I think this could be a decision that comes back to haunt Chelsea, because at the minute, Chris, I don't see them as a team that is going to finish in the top 4. I think there's massive issues with the goalkeeper, massive issues with the defence, and because I don't really see, and Palmer's injured at the moment, I don't really see bags of goals in that Chelsea team with a lack of strikers. The defence is letting in a lot of goals. I think it'll be very difficult for Chelsea to be consistent in this league. Now, having said that, I think this weekend, this might be a game where they might create a chance, because Liverpool have been shown this year that they're going to be an attacking team, and they've got all these attacking players, so they look quite vulnerable at the back. I mean, I think this could be an absolute goal fest, to be honest, because both these teams, their defences look pretty vulnerable all season. Alisson's also injured for this game, the Liverpool goalkeeper, who's been unbelievable for them in the early part of the season. So I think this has got all the makings of a classic game and goals galore, to be honest.
I've actually written down a 2-2 draw for this one. What are you going to go for?
I've gone for a 3-2 Liverpool win.
3-2 Liverpool win. Okay. Right, let's move on to Sunday's games. Aston Villa at Villa Park host Burnley. Aston Villa, of course, won their first league game last weekend. Villa are now 16th. Burnley are down in 18th. Both teams haven't scored that many goals. Aston Villa only 4, Burnley 6. Burnley, of course, last weekend lost 5-1 at the Etihad against Manchester City. How do you see this one going?
Well, I watched when we were chatting about Bournemouth and Fulham, I was saying I watched the Villa-Fulham game last week, and I have to say Villa were second best in the first half, and I really worried for them because it looked like a familiar pattern to the games I've seen Villa earlier in this season. But they got that early goal in the second half, Chris. An early goal a late goal at the end of the first half, and then they come out at the start of the second half like a different team and scored 2 quick-fire goals and took the game away from Fulham. And it looked like Ollie Watkins got back to his best in that game. It looked like Morgan Rogers was coming back in the zone. And it just shows you, you score a few goals and confidence automatically starts coming back. And it looked very much like the Aston Villa under Emery we've seen in recent seasons in that second half against Fulham. Now, I know they beat Bologna in the Europa League last week. So they've won 2 games in a row. They've got another Europa League game tonight. If they're 3 in a row, and all of a sudden, the clouds that are over Villa Park over the last few weeks begin to disappear, and we start to see Villa coming back into their own.
Yeah.
I think Villa fans will be encouraged last week by that second half performance, and I think this is a game at home you would expect Villa to win. Burnley, we know, have been very resilient in recent weeks. I think they had a bit of a nightmare against Man City, conceded a couple of own goals, and I think Cowlin scored 2 goals at the end of the game, which kind of littered the score a bit. It was only 3-1, I think, until the 90th minute, and 2 of those goals were Burnley OGs. So the 5 goals, you just be hoping for Burnley doesn't make them feel less confident, because I think it was just one of those days where everything kind of went wrong for them. But we know what they're going to do at Villa Park. They're going to make it very difficult for Villa to break them down, and Villa haven't been scoring a lot of goals, like you say. So this could be a tricky game to call. I could see it being very tight, Chris.
I'm going to go for a 2-0 Aston Villa home win. Now, Aston Villa are unbeaten in their last 16 Premier League matches against newly promoted sides, winning 12 and drawing 4 since losing 3-0 to Fulham back in October 2022. What's your score prediction?
You've convinced me there with that stat, Chris. No, I'll go for a 2-1 Villa 1.
That's not why these stats are here. You can make your own mind up. Right, next up, of course, this is the only unbeaten team in the Premier League so far this season. Crystal Palace travel to Everton. Now, Everton are currently 9th. Crystal Palace are in 3rd. Very impressive from Crystal Palace so far. Goals scored. Everton so far 7 in the opening 6 games. Crystal Palace have only scored 8 in their opening 6 games. Now, what did you make of the 1-1 draw? Everton against West Ham on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I thought they started the game pretty well, Everton. I think first half they were definitely the better team. And they had a number of chances, Chris, to go 2-0 up early in that second half, and it kind of looked at one point that it was inevitable they were going to go 2-0 up. But once West Ham got back to the level, it seemed to shell shock Everton, and they really struggled to gain any control back in the game. And West Ham finished the team as a stronger team. So it'll be interesting to see how Everton respond to that sort of final 30 minutes, where that's the first time I've seen them on the back foot at home this season for such a long spell. But of course, this game is away, and we know David Moyes is a very organised coach. I think they've been very, very attacking at home, a bit more conservative away from home. So Palace may feel that they have to be the team on the initiative here, and I think that the worry for Palace maybe in the next few weeks is if they keep picking up results, teams might start looking at them the way they look at the Man Cities and the Liverpools and go, well, I don't know if we can go to Palace and open up, because they're very, very good on the counter-attack. So Palace may have to sort of over the next few weeks deal with that being that big team impetus. Teams are going to come here fearing defeat, so they may not be able to notice they break them down, and I think one of Palace's biggest strengths is their counter-attacking threat. So interesting game, Chris. I think it'll be tight as well, but I would just favour Palace being.
Right, before you give me the score prediction, I'm going to go for 1-1, by the way. Crystal Palace are winless in each of their last 10 Premier League away games against Everton, drawing 4 and losing 6 since a 3-2 victory in September 2014 under Neil Warnock.
Sorry, who's at home in this game? Crystal Palace, yeah?
Everton.
Oh, Everton's at home? All right, so Everton's at home. Oh, that does change things there. Sorry, I thought Palace were at home. No, this may suit.
Everton have an excellent home record in their new stadium. Crystal Palace, of course, are the only unbeaten team. I think this has got a draw written all over it.
I actually think Everton being at home, they open up a bit more, and that might suit Palace. So I'm going to go for a Palace away one. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Palace victory.
Wow. Crystal Palace unbeaten going into the October international break. Wow. Right. Newcastle will be hosting Nottingham Forest. Now, as we always say, Gareth, I know it's a cliche, but there is no easy game in the Premier League. Ange Postecoglou needs a win as Forest manager right now, and he's got to now travel to St James's Park. Is he going to get his first win there?
Well, Ange doesn't have good memories of St James's Park with Spurs, and he's had some beatings up there. So he'll look forward to this game. Newcastle are just hot off scoring 4 goals away at Julian Saint-Gilles in Belgium. So that was a brilliant result away from home in Europe. And Eddie Howe was right to point out last week that Newcastle were not at their best they still held Arsenal to a really competitive game, and Arsenal scored with the last tickle of the game. They won the game, and Newcastle were unfortunately losing Liverpool at home as well. So we know Newcastle are a very, very strong home team. Chris, I'll be shocked if Ange is walking away with his first 3 points come 4 o'clock on Sunday. I think this has got a home one written all over.
I agree, but I've seen some Nottingham Forest YouTubers and some Nottingham Forest fans that I've spoken to, and they're already saying that Ange, could be under pressure if he doesn't get a result here.
Did you hear what Morgan Gibbs-White says yesterday in his press conference? Did you hear what he says?
No.
He says that once we click under Ange, we are going to be unstoppable.
Okay.
Which is pretty big comment, Mike. But I just wonder, as Ange pop, we know Ange is a very big motivational speaker, and he likes to make the players feel big and strong, and believe in his way of playing. But I think that's propaganda, Chris. I don't think that's wise from Morgan Gibbs-White coming out and saying that as a club captain. We are going to be unstoppable.
Yeah.
Because Ange has a habit of saying these things, and yes, he did deliver on the trophies, but there was a lot of things he says that didn't come true at Spurs as well. So I just think that's a major comment they make. They've got a huge game tonight in the Europa League at home, and that is going to be their priority to try and get off to a winning start at home in Europe. I think that'll take a lot out of them tonight, regardless of how that game goes. But I think Ange will be targeting a 1 tonight because I think Sunday will be very, very difficult.
I want to go for a 2-1 Newcastle win. What are you going to go for?
We want to go for a 3-1 Newcastle one.
Right, next up, Wolves take on Brighton. Of course, Wolves got their first point of the Premier League campaign at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last weekend. Brighton are currently sitting in 10th. Now, Wolves only have 1 point. Brighton have 8. Brighton are sitting in 10th. And, of course, Wolves are bottom of the table. Let's have a look at some of the facts here. Wolves have won just 2 of their 14 Premier League games against Brighton, drawing 6 and losing 6, and are winless in their last 7, drawing 2 and losing 5 since a win back in December 2021 under Bruno Lage. How do you see this one going? Wolves, would it give them a little bit more confidence? Getting that point at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium last weekend.
Definitely, Chris. But I think last week it probably suited Wolves to get away from Manu because the Leeds game at home, I think everyone targeted 3 points, and Leeds put them to the sword, 3-1. After Wolves got off to a great start, so I think there was no real pressure on them last week away at Spurs. Everyone expected a Spurs win. I think now they've got that point, and they were very they get 3. There will be more of a feel good for right. Let's kick on now. Let's get a 1, and I think that could possibly play in the Brighton's hands. Look, Chris, I don't want to take credit and for the show. But last week you topped up a Crystal Palace victory, and I topped up a Brighton one away at Stamford Bridge. So we have been on fire in recent weeks with these predictions. If anyone's been following, that was an unbelievable couple of predictions last week. Yeah. Brighton, Stamford Bridge, and Crystal Palace, they beat Liverpool. But I think Brighton, again, are another team that are a very dangerous team for anyone. They put Chelsea to the sword in that second half last week. And I think away from home, with Wolves maybe being a bit more confident, a bit more attacking, this could really play in the Brighton's hands, Chris, because we've seen how dangerous they were in the counter-attack against Spurs as well. I think Brighton could have a very good day against Wolves on Sunday.
I'm going to go for a 2-1 Brighton win. What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go for a 3-1 Brighton one.
Our predictions today have been pretty similar. Last game of the weekend, Brentford will be hosting Manchester City. Now, Manchester City, as I mentioned, beat Burnley at the Etihad 5-1 last weekend. Are Manchester City back in the Premier League?
I've heard that statement a number of times over the last kind of year, 18 months. So they get a few results and everybody thinks, oh, are they back? And then they get last night a result around the corner, drawn 2-2 away of Monaco, and Eric Dyer's laughing in front of the TV camera, scoring a penalty. So I think Man City still have a way I still think they have a way to go. Very, very, at the minute, Haaland's on absolute fire. So that gives you half a chance of winning games when he's scoring as many goals as he is. But we know with Man City, Chris, and we've seen this over the last year, biggest issue at the moment is they're conceding far too many goals. And that is a concern. Pep at the minute, he's wrestling, isn't he, to get control of games, and I think they're one of the most vulnerable teams, Chris, in the league when they lose the ball. They just seem to be very, very weak at dealing with transitions, and that's been a problem over the last year, 18 months. So I think this is a cracking game, Chris. They look forward to, and I don't know if we've had too many shock predictions in this show, but I'm going to give you one in this game. I think this will be a difficult game for Man City. I think you've seen the blueprint of Brentford last week. They roughed Man United up. Big Igor Jesus up front looks a real handful. They're not going to waste time. They're going to get Man City's defence turning. Wait for their opportunity to break quick, and any chance of a long ball into the box from a throw-in or a corner is going to be won there. And Keith Andrews is trying to, almost take over from Thomas Frank in a way, not change too much.
Yeah. And
I think Brent have had a brilliant start to the season, considering they've lost so much in terms of Frank and the players they've lost. So I think this will be a really difficult game for Man City. 4:30 game, big game of the weekend, and I think Brentford will be up for it, and they'll cause Man City problems.
I think it's going to be a very different game, though, Manchester United to playing Manchester City. I'm going to go for a 2-0 away win. I'm going to go for a 2-0 City win. I take it from what you've said about a shock, you're going to go for a home win.
I'm going to go for the big shock of the weekend. Results going to wait to the last game. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Brentford 1.
Okay, right. Gareth, thank you so much for joining us yet again. And as you said at the very start, these weeks are whizzing by. But yes, enjoy the weekend. Let's hope that Spurs can go to Ellen Road, pick up 3 points in the Premier League, and of course we will then all be smiling going into the international break. Are you up to anything special this weekend or during the international break?
Funny enough, I'm actually going out now at 7 p.m. for my mum's 50th birthday. Would you believe we're going out for a meal? So happy birthday, Mum! And let's hope Spurs can get us a win this weekend to celebrate. Because we do need to get back to winning games in the Premier League. So over the international break, Chris, no, I'll be suffering watching Ireland, no doubt, and I'll be begging for the return of the Premier League. Because believe it or not, Ireland is much worse being an Irish fan than supporting Spurs. And that is saying something.
Well, wish your mum a very happy birthday from all of us at the Spurs Chat podcast, Gareth, and have a great evening, have a great weekend, and we will see you again soon. Thank you so much for joining me yet again. We will be back again for another Premier League predictions after the international break. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend. Stay safe and well, and come on, you Spurs.